Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello.
How's
well,
everybody doing?
well, we're doing absolutely fabulous. How the heck are you, buddy?
What's your favorite color?
Apparently green at the moment.
Well, there's some yellow and stuff out here, so I thought the hat was funny. I didn't realize the hat just points straight up.
Well, everyone is in the Christmas mood. We are in such a happy state. It is great to see everyone. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. How the heck are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good. Just enjoying the day off today, if I'm honest.
Oh,
So
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
yeah. Well, how wonderful that you took the day off just to spend it with us. How great.
Well, we did take a little bit of a while to fix this one in, so I thought, well, I better make sure I'm actually going to be in a position to actually make it.
Oh, well, thank you so much, buddy.
So was it a holiday over there, or was it just like a
It's a
day you
holiday
took
for me.
for you?
It's not
For
a
you,
holiday
yeah.
in the Netherlands.
It's Kevin's holiday, so
It's my holiday.
you
Oh,
deserve
well,
it.
it's great seeing everyone, and thank you all so much for being here. We got Stina is already dressed up as well, sporting her Christmas jumpers and Christmas apparel as well. So it's great to be in the festive spirit. And Kevin, now we know you as like Kevin and I, and you go way back, but some of our viewers, some of the people might be watching, don't know you. Do you want to give a little introduction?
Yeah, sure, I can do the standard kind of bio thing if people really want. So yeah, hi folks, my name's Kevin Chant. I'm a data engineering manager living in the Netherlands. However, as some of you might have picked up on already, I'm actually originally from the UK. So I basically live over here because my wife is Dutch. And I'm keeping an eye on all the chat as well, by the way, everybody. Um, so yeah, outside of that, as you two know already, I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP.
Mm-hmm.
I was formerly a developer technologies MVP as well, up
Mm.
until
Oh,
a
okay.
while ago. Hence why the DevOps background as well.
So
Uh,
what brought you from the developer side into more the data side?
it was actually the other way around.
Oh,
So
Oh.
I worked in data for quite some time. A while, I'd just say a while ago now, so it doesn't identify any entities or anything. A while ago, I was working for a client and they really needed their whole DevOps redeveloped for their team,
hmm
basically. And I had to help merge development and operations team into one and help set up deployment pipelines in Azure DevOps. So I had to spend quite a lot of time learning how to do everything fully in Azure DevOps. It was a bit of a learning curve. So that's how I ended up doing the developer side of it as well
okay.
from that aspect. So yeah, it just went from there really. During lockdown, presented a lot about using Azure DevOps to do deployments for technologies like SQL Server. Then went on to do it for Synapse, as you two know. And now I do one or two posts and stuff now and again about using Fabric with
Mhm.
development tools, as you may have noticed.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's how I ended up getting very involved with the DevOps side of
that,
things.
that's great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear more of what you have to talk about today. Because yeah, I'm one that I love data warehouses, right? I think it's great to use them in Fabric, especially if you have um, uh, the the background in SQL, right? Already have those T-SQL skills. It's a good way to transition in. And they built in, as you're going to show us, they build in some stuff to really kind of help us out and everything. So it's going to be great to hear how to use it the best way. So
And I think uh, I think the big challenge a lot of people in data space has is how do you deal with? I always think of it as the the way I've heard it best explained is how do you deal with like moving code in DevOps is easy. The mass of data state that we deal with, that's the hard part. How we manage that, what do we do in those, to handle those types of things. I think that's where the big challenges people come in with. And
Yeah.
you're saying you've got some new things that we're going to be talking about today. Yes.
Yeah, I've also got some, well, kind of old things as well.
Oh.
So there's a bit of old, bit of new, a combination of both, because what you can do in Fabric now, you've been able to do for years in other products. So I'll cover those as well in this session. Fingers crossed.
Well, great. Well, let's kind of, do we care about rules? It's Christmas time. We throw rules out, right?
Yeah, we have rules. I've got rules
here
somewhere.
I saw one question in the chat. Just quickly, someone asked, so in the chat very briefly, how do you practice DevOps for free? My first portal call, to be honest, would be for yourself, the Microsoft Learn material.
Okay.
For the person that asked there. So anyway.
Well, and even, depending on how your company has some things set up or whatever, or if you have your own domain, which I definitely recommend, it's usually worth the investment and everything. That DevOps, the first 5 licenses, I think, are free.
They are.
So, you could use Azure DevOps, but even if you don't want to do that, a lot of what what we see in Azure DevOps and everything, the wording's a little bit different. The concepts are the same in GitHub. It might be a couple tweaks here and there, but you could practice all this stuff out on GitHub.
Kevin's ruined my surprise here for
man,
on the
sorry.
It's fine. I'm only joking, of course, everyone. So yeah, like Kevin said, that the concepts are the same whether you're doing stuff in Azure DevOps or GitHub. Just things are done slightly differently most of the time. Back to Kevin's point as well. If you're working for a company, if you're working for a medium-sized company, I would say, or a large enterprise, there's a strong chance that they will have a Pluralsight subscription for you. If you're learning Azure DevOps itself, Pluralsight videos are ideal. They've got an entire learning path just for Azure DevOps. So how I started learning Azure DevOps myself many years ago now was actually going through the entire learning path initially. Because I had a lot to cover back then.
Well, so where you'd recommend people start in Microsoft Learn, is that correct, Kevin?
Microsoft Learn. If you've got access to Pluralsight, then the Pluralsight videos for the DevOps expert certification on Pluralsight, that's a really good learning path as well. For those of you who have access to it, of course. And there are lots of other free material available online for folks. So yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'm just getting those links together. Apologies for that. Oh man.
Oh, that's a nice link.
Oh, Bing links.
Wait, let me copy that down. I got paper here. I'm gonna write this down.
Holy cow! There we go.
What I can do as well for some of the more targeted stuff, especially for stuff we're going to be talking about today anyway, I should really put my social stuff in the chat as well, so Chris can copy it over.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm a bad host. I've got your X profile right here. I'm trying.
That's fine.
There we go. And make sure you give Kevin a follow on LinkedIn and holy cow. Oh, you got all the links right here. Well, this is even easier. So there we go.
Well, I came prepared, When I lived in the UK, I was a Cub Scout.
Well, that's fantastic, man. All right, so what do you want to show us today, Kevin, that
I think everybody's pretty much spoiled for choice, to be honest. I mean, I could just do like the other people in the other 60 odd episodes have done and shown Fabric. I don't think anybody wants to see just Fabric, though. I can quickly go through a quick introduction to Azure DevOps for people, but it depends on the audience because we have a mixed audience here, and some people will have already seen it and know all about it.
let's
All of them.
start there. Give us the quick intro to Azure DevOps.
I will do
And
my very lightning version introduction.
that
So,
sounds good.
yeah. So, everybody, for those who have yet to see it, this is Azure DevOps. What I'll actually do is F11 on this. Oh, F11 on the wrong screen, apparently. So, this is Azure DevOps when you first go into it. To go into Azure DevOps to see how good Chris's copy and paste is here, you can just go straight to dev.azure.com. If you're already signed in with a Microsoft related account, it will show you something similar to this. So at the top left hand corner, you have this Azure DevOps, and that reflects the account you're logged in as well as the Microsoft Entra. I nearly said Azure Active Directory there. Microsoft Entra tenant that you're logged into. Underneath, you'll see a list of organizations you've got access to. And these organizations can be company you work for, or if you work for a large enterprise, it could well be just a domain, or it can be one you've created yourself for testing purposes. And like the other Kevin mentioned earlier, if you create your own organization, the first 5 basic licenses that you assign are free. So basically, if you want to test Azure DevOps yourself, you can create your own organization. I have an older blog post relating to it. However, Microsoft has an in-depth documentation about it now as well. Anyway, if you have the right permissions, you can change various settings at the organization level. This is obviously a very short time change session. I'm not going to go through all of this. A lot of this is intuitive anyway. As you can see, there's extra settings as well relating to boards, so process. So if you're working with work items, you can customize all your different work items, adding things like stakeholder columns, etc. Various pipeline settings here. So you have these things called agent pools. Help with a bit of jargon here. When you create pipelines in Azure DevOps, it doesn't do all the work itself. It's not really per se like a SaaS offering. It actually sends the work to servers behind the scenes, and these servers are known as agents. And you can either have Microsoft hosted ones or your own ones.
So
and
now we use the word pipelines here, and pipelines is one of these terms that gets well overused, right? So, but people that might have heard a little bit about Fabric or whatever, and we hear about pipelines there, right? Totally different, right?
Totally different. I will break down this pipeline. The pipelines here are the pipelines in Azure pipelines within Azure DevOps.
Which is moving code rather than
it's
data,
moving code. It's moving artifacts as well, etc. You're doing it either code-based or through your nice GUI. I'll show you some demos of that in a bit, or at least within the next 45 minutes. So yeah. So pipelines in Azure DevOps in the Azure Pipeline Service are very different than deployment pipelines in Microsoft Fabric. Like Kevin said, it is confusing because pipelines are used a lot everywhere. Hopefully, we'll be able to help you today demystify the different types of pipelines. One setting I will show everybody here, because it's a very common question that I see online that I get asked about. A lot of people ask why they can't work with the classic pipelines anymore. So basically, you know, the nice GUI pipelines you can do for building, creating DAP packs and for doing your releases. Not everybody can do those now. And that's because Microsoft have added these 2 settings. So if you're not able to work with the classic pipeline, so basically the GUI-based classic editor and your releases, this is why, everybody. I did want to highlight this here. It's a very, very common question.
So do you think people
hang on a second.
Go ahead.
Are you turning on the disabled, or like right now with your settings
turn on the disabled settings? So if these settings are enabled, then you will no longer be able to use the nice GUI pipelines.
Are they enabling them by default now on newer
They
ones?
are enabled by default at this moment in time.
And you already disabled, you turned it off, which means you are allowed to use them.
I'm allowed to use them, and I use them when I present like this because it's easier to show people graphically when they're first understanding pipelines.
Yeah.
In enterprises, they tend to be disabled, and there's multiple reasons why to disable them. There are a few security concerns, but from my personal perspective, it's more to do with portability, because when you create a YAML pipeline, it actually creates a file in your repository, which means when you move your repository elsewhere, you take that file and you can easily set it back up again. You can't do that with the classic pipelines. You have to recreate everything. Yes, they do add some YAML now to make it easier, but you still have to do that plumbing in the GUI.
Yeah, YAML sounds very technical. What does it mean?
Depending on who you ask, yeah. So it allegedly is yet another markup language. It depends on who you ask.
I always heard yet another or yes another, right?
Yeah.
Another markup language.
What was the other one? Uint markup language is the other one I've heard as well. So yeah.
So I like XML. Is that fair to say?
They both have definitions. That much is true. It's not quite the same as XML. Well, it's metadata based. It is text based, so it's along the same lines. But that's where it ends.
Every time I looked at YAML, I thought, "Boy, that looks like XML." But that's just me. Maybe.
Well, what I can do when I show a demo today, I'll actually show you how to make your lives a little bit easier. Well, actually, I'll show a couple of ways. Everybody's disappeared.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. There's not everybody. It's just back to the focus of me, you, and Kevin again, which is fine. Yeah. So everybody, all the people that have just joined, can see us all looking very festive right now.
So were we? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We were just hitting here for a while, and I thought we were going back to talking. We can go back in.
We can go back to this, because I was going to finish the introduction and just say that every organization has one or more projects.
Okay.
And I was just going to help out again with Kevin's point about the pipeline moniker being a bit confusing because it's overused a bit. So just so everybody's aware, Azure DevOps is actually a collection of services and applications that can be extended. The default services are Azure Boards for Work items, Azure Repos, which is very important if you want to use Git integration in Fabric with Azure DevOps, because this is where your Git repositories will be stored. I'll click on one briefly now. And all this is a visual representation of your Git repositories. So everything you see here is stored in Azure DevOps in your Git repository. This is just a nice visualization of it. And then you have the pipelines, which we were just talking about in depth in Azure Pipelines. And what I can quickly show you here, if I make sure I find one here, a classic one. Let me check to see if this is GUI based or not. Let's start with another one instead. That's YAML, by the way, everybody, but maybe I should do a GUI based introduction first. So this one I do believe. So here is what's known as the classic editor, is the classic build interface. So those of you who are watching, looking at older Azure DevOps documentation and videos, seeing there's a little build icon which has disappeared. That's because it's been replaced by pipelines. And this is basically what you used to see when you clicked on build in the past. Bit of a history lesson here, everybody.
I remember build, yep.
I remember walking uphill both ways to the build icon.
So, yeah. So this is Azure Pipelines, and all I do, we'll go back to us, I think, in a minute. If you've got the right settings, you can change project settings as well. But I think that's it as far as the introduction is concerned. We can go back to just the three of us for a bit, because there's plenty of other things we can talk about. And excellent. I see the chat's quite busy with everybody.
Yep. And, just if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. Kevin is a sharp individual. I can wager he knows the answer to any question you've got, or we can play a little stump the chump, either way. So this is fantastic. Oh, hey, Kevin, one of the challenges I've had with DevOps is that like straight up Power BI and I'll admit to a lesser extent, Fabric haven't really had a great integration story with DevOps, right? Like a lot of this stuff is fairly new. Can you kind of explain to us like what your thoughts are on the state of integration with Fabric and with the work that we're doing in DevOps?
Definitely. So from my perspective anyway, that it's getting there and there's been a lot of progress made. I personally like the Power BI desktop projects now. I like the fact that you can use it to create a set of files locally, synchronize it with your Azure DevOps repository, and then synchronize that with a Fabric workspace. So, and there's other things, as you know, there's the new readability of the metadata as well and everything involved. And this is bringing along some interesting capabilities now. So, for example, and it's the one item I didn't put in for a link to be done today. I do apologize. Hopefully, Chris will be able to find it. So now Microsoft have actually got a guide on how you can do continuous integration tests for your Power BI reports. So they're basically helping everybody move forwards with your Power BI story, because now what you can do is have a Fabric workspace that represents your development environment, branch out to a feature workspace, and then when you're merged, make your change to your Power BI report, and then when you're merging your change back, behind the scenes, you can get it to run a Azure pipeline, just to clarify that for everybody, to run the Tabular Editor CLI and PBI Inspector to check the quality of your report and semantic model. Now, with the Tabular Editor side, it uses the best practices analyzer rules, which you can customize. Or if you want to check to make sure nobody's done something silly, like not deselected for the date table to be created, you can just use the default rule set. I may have done this myself before. Allegedly. And the same for PBI Inspector as well. It's still fairly new, but development's coming along. And there is a V2 for it now as well. Now that includes support for PBIR. And that can check the quality of your report, can check your visualizations and everything. So Microsoft are making progress, especially from a Power BI perspective. So you've gone from the last, right, let's take it from when it was announced at Build last year. So if we say 18 months, from the last 18 months, you've gone from just not just at all. You've gone from an introduction of how to save Power BI reports as metadata or as code, to then all of a sudden being introduced to Tyndall to help ease more readability as far as your semantic model information is concerned. And the continuous integration tests, which are being steered by Microsoft, and the community efforts as well from other people, so you can do additional tests and additional methods. So from my perspective, I think the story's coming along nicely, like I said, and you've also got the feature branch out to new workspace as well. It's coming along, I think, very well. And I know there's some angst with people, but it's like, yeah, the development effort, the put of this in place in Fabric is just phenomenal. And the fact that within an 18-month period, we're already at this stage, I think is actually quite good. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, people have different viewpoints on that.
So you brought up PBI Inspector. That seems to be an open source project.
It is. And there's a version 2 now as well.
Really?
Yeah, I put a link in the private thing for you, right? It's Nate, is that it? Or Nat?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. PBI Inspector V2.
Yeah.
That's going out as well.
Yeah, it's the first I heard of this one, so I'll have to dig more into this one.
Well, I
Pretty cool.
tell you what, Kevin, if you really want, I mean, I can go all the way through it and show a demo of this in this talk. I've
Shut
got
up.
everything
All right,
lined up.
let's take a look. Let's see
Let's
Yeah.
how
do
it works.
this.
How would we inspect our Power
Yes.
BI files as part of our CI/CD deployments?
Let's go all the way to the beginning, I think, for everybody, so everybody can see the entire flow and see the full story. I will do the fast version. So I've got this Power BI report here. As you can see, I've got an amazing chart, and I've got something which is really could do with some attention. Don't squint, everybody. I'm literally just changing a page name. So I'm just doing that now. One thing I forgot to show everybody, because some people may not know this, if you go to the options in Power BI Desktop, and hopefully, of course, I'm doing this live, so there's going to be a delay, apparently.
Hey, if it fails, you'd be right on par for what we do here. So
That's fine. So if I go to preview features here, I'll zoom in. So you select preview features. You'll see I've got Power BI project save option. And that allows you to save a Power BI desktop project. So if I go to file and I go save as, you'll see down here, it says save as a PBIP. It doesn't just save the PBIP file out, it saves an entire project format. Just like similar to this one. It's almost how I was prepared. So by default, you get the top two folders you can see here. So you get a folder that stores all the metadata for the report and one for your semantic model. And because I got Tyndall selected, I can save in this nice Tyndall format. Now, something I've yet to do, if I just quickly go and save my change here, Power BI Desktop, and I go back to Visual Studio, you'll see it's recognized I've done the change because I've already initialized this folder to be what's known as a Git repository. And I've set up synchronization between my local Git repository and the Git repository in Azure DevOps. Don't worry, everybody, you'll see it very quickly in a minute. So I'm just going to say changed page here. Very quickly commit. To help with some jargon, commit basically means harden the change. I click on sync changes. And then I can go back in to Azure DevOps. If I go to the repository it's saved, so give me a second. If I turn my head sideways, everybody, it's because it's on the other screen, by the way. So as you can see, just now I made the change. So if I go into Fabric and I select the right workspace, hopefully I didn't need to introduce everybody to the Fabric workspace there.
I think
so
we're good.
I have a workspace in Fabric which represents a feature environment, a feature branch. So I hit I've got two actually that represent a feature branch, and apparently I'm showing you the one that represents it for GitHub, which was not very relevant for this one. 2 seconds. So once I show you the white workspace, you'll see it recognizes the changes have happened already in my Git repository behind the scenes. So here, as you can see in source control, I have 2 tabs. One's update, one's change. An update basically means it recognizes there's an update done in the behind the scenes repository. So I can update all of that. And so far, so good. So the change I did in Power BI Desktop is now reflected here in my feature branch.
Yeah, and I think that would probably be the most confusing part for a lot of people, right? What you noticed is we're not using the publish from desktop in order to get things to the workspace. You do the save, you do the commit, the sync of the repositories, and then this sync here. Couple extra clicks, but it's really worth it to keep track of your changes.
Exactly. So it's moving more towards a DevOps mindset for everybody now.
Yeah, and Christina's right. If you're watching this and you're like, holy cow, this went pretty quick. Christina did 2 videos last year with us that went through at every little step of this. So, you know, you can refer back to that. And in fact, if you search CI/CD and Power BI, you get Christina, her name in that video come right up. So
Nice.
Yeah. I've also got very detailed blog posts about everything you see today as well.
Good. And that's over at Kevin's blog. Let me get that for you too.
Nice plug for me there, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got
we got to get that sweet blog money.
That's awesome.
Speaking of which, if you want early access to all of this content, you want to support this channel, become a member for as low as $5 a month. You get early access to all my videos. So
now we get to do the CI part. This is
okay.
the main part of this. So everything else was fast tracked because, like everybody said, all the rest of it up until now, heavily documented, heavily videoed by people. So this is where the magic happens now. So we have a workspace that represents your development environment. So we want to move the update now from our feature workspace to our development workspace. So how do you do that? We go back in the Azure DevOps, and you can see here, it's very kindly asking me if I want to do a pull request. Now, a pull request is basically where you ask for changes to be merged from one branch to the other in your Git repository. However, here, I don't want to merge it into my main branch. I want to merge it into my dev branch because something I should have shown you all earlier. If you go to workspace settings and you go to Git integration, my development branch is rather conveniently connected to my dev branch in my Git repository. So here I'm going to do create, and this is where the magic is going to happen. And this is what I like the most, because now you'll see I've got a pipeline in Azure Pipelines running. And that's because if we go to my branches for my Git repository, you will see that for my development branch, I've got what's known as a branch policy in place. And all this policy is setting certain policies for things to happen before you can do a pull request to that particular branch. And all I'm saying here is, before you complete any merges, do a build validation by running a pipeline in Azure Pipelines. So if we go to pipelines, it's hopefully running now, and it is. So you can see I've already got this pipeline running as we speak. Now, this is where you're going to see some YAML here, folks. So all I want to quickly show here, because obviously there are videos and documentation online about this. This pipeline, as you can see here, is running tabular editor with the default rules. And if I scroll further down, I won't focus on all of this for now because it's YAML and you have to get the grips of it. And I am running PBI inspector afterwards. Now, I did promise I would show you something to help with your journey here if you're learning YAML or working with YAML. First one is there is an assistant. So, for example, if you know the PowerShell you're going to write, I can just type in PowerShell and quickly add a PowerShell task here. Just a little bit of a tip for everybody. Depending on what you're looking to achieve as well with YAML pipelines, or if you're curious, yeah, I am going to plug something on my own apparently again here. I do have some GitHub repositories, which Chris has already shared the link for earlier, which you can download and use as a template to perform CI/CD for various objects, including, like Kevin was talking about earlier, Microsoft Fabric data warehouses. So I do have quite in-depth repositories there, and they have populated wikis in them as well. So I give you some additional instructions in the wikis. Not everybody does that. I do, because I want to help everybody adopt all of this. I've also, I'll say very recently, but actually it was yesterday, just showed one for doing it for SQL databases in Fabric as well. So if anybody watching is
look at
experimenting with
that.
SQL databases in Fabric, and I do believe, let me see if I've got it here.
The link to that repository is in the chat, by the way.
This one.
Yep.
So
Oh
there
wait,
you
no,
go.
that's Azure SQL databases.
So this is new, as in new, yesterday new. Well, obviously you can see I actually created it 2 days ago. A new repository I'm sharing for those of you who are keen to look at SQL databases and Fabric. We're deviating a bit from Power BI here, but just to get the point across, you would use this usually if you've got a challenge like multiple SQL databases in the same workspace. So where, for example, deployment pipelines would not be suitable, deploying like this by using an Azure pipeline is a very good justification. And there's other scenarios as well, like if you've got SQL databases in Fabric running in another tenant, for example. Anyway.
So a question came in. Would you recommend using developer tools like VS Code, et cetera, for CI/CD rather than only using deployment pipelines? What's your take on that, Kevin?
My take on this is it very much depends on the scenario. And it kind of ties in very nicely with something I need to share with you all now anyway. So bear with me whilst I get the rest of this up. And I'll put all the other links in together for Chris to share. So Microsoft released, oh, I've been truncated. Bear with me.
Don't truncate.
Don't truncate me.
That sounds like a new line to go around.
Well, and it sounds like a great hip hop song if data and programming were actually part of the culture.
Yeah.
Don't truncate me.
So for the benefit of everybody here, because this is one of the things I like from Microsoft that they've recently published, they've got a reasonably new article that goes through the different CI/CD workflow options for you. So they show a recommended development process and then various scenarios. And if we scope down the different scenarios, and this is why I'm showing this now, you will see one of them is for your use case for deploying using Fabric deployment pipelines. And this is useful if you want people to do it directly within Microsoft Fabric, for example, and you can deploy certain items as well in the different stages. And of course, it does depend on whether or not your work, if you're deploying to workspaces in the same tenant. But in these kind of scenarios, deployment pipelines is quite good. My personal recommendation, though, on this is if you want an easy deployment between different stages and you don't need approvals, yes, deployment pipelines in Fabric are great. And I think what we should do, if I finish this a minute, I'll be able to actually show you deployment pipelines. Let's do that first, and then we can help people realize, oh, something's gone wrong here. Okay. Regardless of that part, we can still go straight to deployment pipeline so we can show you the difference. So obviously, those who work with Power BI for some time, deployment pipelines aren't new to you because they have been around for quite a while now, but you can also use them in Fabric as well. Just for awareness, the GUI is due to change in the future. Microsoft have documented this online. They have got a new GUI coming. It was available briefly, some of you may remember, and then it got removed again, but it is coming in the future.
Oh, I was just going to ask you what happened to the. Did you disable the new GUI, but they turned it off? Huh?
It wasn't me. There's a paragraph in the documentation. It was there for a while. There was an issue, so they openly said, yeah, it's going to come back at some stage.
Oh, fair enough.
So going back to answering the question, deployment pipelines are good if you want the GUI-based experience like this, self-service, etc. However, if you want an approvals process with your pipeline stages, what I tend to recommend to do is create your stages either in Fabric or through the APIs, and actually orchestrate the deployments outside of Fabric and use Azure pipelines instead. And rather unsurprisingly to the pair of you probably, I've actually got demo for this already. So let's do the standard one first. So you can orchestrate the deployment to the different stages in your Microsoft Fabric deployment pipelines. So these stages here, using pipelines in Azure DevOps. So like I said, the benefits
Andrew
of
is saying that it's back for him.
The new GUI.
Say that again.
The new GUI on the deployment pipelines. Andrew is saying that it arrived, left, and came back again. So I guess maybe he's in an A/B testing or something. Where
it could be in the settings, to be honest with you. I will flip and check after the session. Okay. If it's back, that's great, because it was great and then it disappeared. And then I found that paragraph that says it's been taken away for a bit. If it's back, that's brilliant. So, like I said, one of the advantages of taking the actual deployment to the stages and orchestrating it in Azure pipelines is the fact that you can do things like the approvals, etc. So as you can see here, I was saying to do a pre-deployment approval. And to help answer the question a little bit further, what you can even do then, if you're orchestrating it through Azure DevOps, you can do additional tasks. So for example, I can deploy all of my updates to my Power BI reports and my other items to a test workspace. I can then run the notebook that's been deployed into that test workspace as well, and then go on to deploy to the other stages. So you get that additional flexibility if you're deploying to your Microsoft Fabric deployment pipeline stages using pipelines in Azure DevOps. I hope that's clear for everybody. Yeah. That was a long answer, but I think I needed to go down that route to give that level of detail for the question.
No, that makes good sense. Yeah. Thank you.
So
okay. I'm sorry. I seem to be having like a brain fart here, but Sanjay was asking, how do you manage your repos? Do you do it by workload? Do you do it by type? What's your recommendation?
For all of the different repositories, it
yes,
depends.
Okay.
So I do have a blog post about this as well, because it's a big debate for everybody about the number of workspaces to use. I'm not going to go for the full ins and outs of all the different scenarios, because yeah, we could be here for quite some time. All I'm going to say is that the recommendation is to keep your workspace and Fabric item strategy simple until your company policies, etc., expect otherwise. Because you could, for example, look to do full workspaces for development, test, acceptance, production. But if you're a small house, you may not even, well, reasonable size company, I should say, you may not even need an acceptance environment. You could just have development, test, and production. It could be you're just working in not even at any stages really, or just development and production. People are, for security reasons, recommending to have Fabric items split in multiple workspaces. And yeah, that can be good for security and other purposes. But before you go down that route, I would ask yourself, do you need to do that?
Yeah.
So,
well, let's take a little quick example, right? Like if we say we're focused a lot on the Power BI reports here. One of the best practice is to separate your semantic model and your report, right?
Yeah.
So you'll have those in different sets of workspaces. And you could tell me if I'm doing it wrong, but when I do that, then I have two different repositories. I would have a repository that my reports are in and a repository that my semantic model is in. And then take it through the processes that you're talking about within those repositories, because then you could build policies and everything specific to that repository. You can kind of do it with different folder structures and stuff in one repository, but to me, I always found that harder. So I think that kind of goes a little bit to Sanjay's question. What have you found?
What have I found? Well, if you do the split between your semantic model and your report in the different workspaces, what you can actually do with your say for example, the continuous integration checks we went through earlier, what you can actually do there in your pipelines, and this is one of the things I like about YAML pipelines, is that you can actually configure it to download, clone multiple branches from different repositories at the same time together to unify your testing. So I found that actually, even in that scenario, you can still do your integration tests, for example, and you'll also keep in line with your company's security policies as well and best practices, etc. So when you're working in a DevOps related way, as long as you understand the fact that you can do that with your pipelines, you can still implement your continuous integration strategies. It is a challenge, I must admit, and you do get some issues now and again due to various configurations, but it's still possible. And this is the thing that everyone needs to realize. On that note, for those of you who don't know how to declare multiple repositories when you're running a pipeline, just go to Copilot in Edge is your friend for that one. It will give you all the details you need on how to do it. It'll even point you for links for examples. And this is what I tend to say to people. I say, look, just go to Copilot in Edge and that'll give you all the details you need. Maybe for a future repository, I might just do a pipeline that caters for that now. Actually, Kevin, that's not about giving me food for thought to do that. I'll have to add it to the list for the future. Show people how to actually declare other repositories and branches in your pipeline, because that can be important for you.
Yeah.
That was a great question. I will say, as someone who doesn't understand DevOps exceedingly well, I understand the concepts of it, but I don't know how to work it. I have given that design pattern to engineers and they've struggled with that in the past. So if there's any tips or guidance on that, that'd be fantastic.
Definitely. Definitely make sure they have an awareness of the fact that they can actually clone multiple repositories basically and branches when they're working with pipelines, so they can still run their continuous integration checks and work with both sets of repositories to do those checks together.
Oh, because then if my report fails, I could roll back my semantic model and I could roll back my lakehouse changes, right?
Well, the reality is, if you're doing the continuous integration test, if that fails, it won't even let you merge the change from your feature branch. So you're shifting left. And this is something I'm trying to encourage now, thanks to the advances with the Power BI story and Microsoft Fabric. What I'm trying to recommend to people now is adopt good DevOps practices and shift left as far as possible. So if we go, for example, to Microsoft's document for the CI/CD workflow options, and I scroll back up to here. So this says main here, but the reality is, if you're using this strategy with deployment pipelines, this will actually probably be your development branch. So what I'm saying is, if you introduce your continuous integration strategy at this stage, when you're going to merge from your feature workspace, so say if you branched out to a new workspace, you've done a copy of your development workspace to a feature workspace, and then you went to merge your changes back. If you've done something, well, let's just say a bit dodgy, and it gets picked up by your continuous integration tests, it won't even let you merge the change back. So this can help prevent issues before they're actually an issue, because all you've done, you've essentially done something a bit wrong in your feature workspace, but not the development one. So all of your colleagues that are working in that development workspace, I'll say this nicely as I can, are shielded from your mistake.
Yep.
Well, that sure is nice, right?
Yeah. There is caveat involved. Of course, there are trade-offs just like everything else that's new. It does mean that if you're going to use the branch out to new workspace, the people doing that need the right permissions both in Fabric
Yes.
and the workspace behind the scenes, which can be either in Azure DevOps, as we've seen, or as me and Kevin mentioned earlier, and I will quickly show it to everybody, or it could be in a GitHub repository as well. We've touched on GitHub repositories.
Yeah, kind of on that note, right? Not only so, like if you're going to use that feature, because we're using it quite a bit to branch out to another workspace, the developers have to have the ability to create workspaces. Number one, they have to be able to create workspaces on a capacity that you want them to use for development. So you're going to have that, right? And then, like you're saying, then they in the repository, they got to have rights against the ability on the repository. So there are multiple levels, like you pointed out, and it can get a little frustrating to set up at first. So we had some of that.
Especially when people are testing with GitHub as well, and you get the discussions of, do you want to start using GitHub for Git integration?
Mm.
And then people realize that as soon as they realize that they can't specify a region for their GitHub repositories in the cloud-based version, at least, they realize that they have to look at Azure DevOps instead.
So yeah, I haven't looked at it from the GitHub side. I've been doing it on Azure DevOps, so I could imagine it'd be a little harder there. Interesting.
Yeah, so from a GitHub perspective, you have to create personal access tokens. It's not managed at this moment in time by Entra, and it only supports what's known as the GitHub.com offering, so all the cloud-based versions of GitHub. So whether it's GitHub Personal or GitHub Enterprise, you can use a repository in either, but you can't specify a region to deploy these repositories in. So if you are using Microsoft Fabric Git integration with GitHub, just be aware that your repository can be potentially cached on servers around the world. There is no way at this moment in time to fix it in place.
That's interesting. All right. Well, we are nearing the end of this wonderful time. So, Kevin, before we sign off for the day, what would be one thing you would say people should explore that's new in GitHub or in CI/CD, or what's one thing that you think people are missing as part of their solution deployments?
Oh, that's a very good question. At this moment in time, there's too many.
Okay.
One thing that people are missing is just the awareness of what you can do in Azure pipelines. I've shown them one tip of the iceberg with the continuous integration checks. It is worth learning at least the basic skills of what you can do there. I personally would recommend YAML pipelines for portability. Of course, I do understand there's several pros and cons about that, but that's my personal recommendation. Learn more about the security in Azure DevOps as well. That can be a big deal for people. So that's a few things there.
So if I'm thinking about integration pipelines, like you're talking about, what's the highest value integration test that I could start with to make this worth my time and energy?
You mean based on the continuous integration test we saw today?
Correct.
By far, at this moment in time, I mean, there are other community offerings out there, but if you're looking at the two that we've seen today, definitely the best practices from Tabular Editor. It is a very basic start, and then build from there. I would look to customize further down the line, but just even the default rules for best practices analyzer with the Tabular Editor CLI, you can still pick up quite a lot there.
That's fantastic. And now, when a model fails the BPA, do you stop the deployment, or are you able to control that?
You're able to control that with either warnings or errors. You can still proceed with warnings, but if it's a total error, like we saw earlier in the demo, it won't move forwards with the approval at all. So
Well, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
so you can kind of configure it, because I think it even gives you, with the best practice analyzer, it says this is like a number one severity, number two,
yeah,
number three, and you could say, I will allow things with 2 and 3s to go through, but not number ones, right, or something like
exactly.
that. So yeah. And the other thing that I would add, I know a lot of people, and what you've presented is looking at this as a big team, right? But even if you're just a developer of one, start with the basics and start using these type of concepts. Number one, you'll learn it to when you get into a team, and it has saved my butt a few times. So
Yeah,
Well, I think the biggest thing there is like if you stop yourself from deploying a breaking change, that's
Mhm.
a huge benefit. Like the nights and weekends I've had to spend dealing with someone accidentally implementing a breaking change is like that's no fun, right?
Yeah.
And through these new tools and capabilities, you can test that out right in the deployments, and you don't run that risk of breaking things. And that's a huge step forward because I mean, we're all old enough to remember, okay, well, we've got the whole team together, and this weekend we're deploying all the big changes. And so it starts on Friday night and the system's going down, and you make sure there's pizzas on Friday night, and someone's doing a Starbucks run in the morning and getting, like, Dunkin' sandwiches or whatever, right? Like, yeah, we recall all that stuff, right? Now with CI/CD, we're starting to say like, okay, hey, not only do we not need to do that stuff anymore, um, but like now we can do deployments anytime we want. So it's
yeah.
actually fantastic.
And here's the thing everybody needs to realize as well. If you do this yourself, from all the way from your, I would say, development workspace, but if you're using the feature workspace throughout all the way through the production, if you're doing that yourself and you're doing it all the time, it also means that when you have to do it to scale to multiple workspaces, multiple production workspaces, even. So, say for example, if you're an ISV or something like that, you're prepared for it already. You have that knowledge there to scale this out once you grasp the
Mhm.
fundamentals.
Good
That
point.
is spot on. All right, Kevin, since you are our guest, we're gonna let you say goodbye to everyone, and we'll sign off for the day.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for attending. And yeah, obviously, thanks, Chris and Kevin, who happens to be Chris, happens to the name of my brother as well. So this is very surreal for me.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you guys
Thanks,
all
Bill.
so very much. You guys have the best day ever. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks, all.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.